Hi, welcome to this tutorial today. What I'm going to show you is something that I don't see a lot of other people do, and that's giving tips on how to improve your game art. So this was a level that I made in 2021, and this is just my experience over 2 years of working with levels and how to make them look better. So this was a park. It's got some lights and trees and stuff and some ground and roads. That's pretty much what it is. Uh, and maybe when you're starting out, you might have a level like this. But I'm going to show you how to turn something like that into something like this. Uh, so that's what this video is for, is to help you understand the things that can improve your art quality from this to this. Okay, so with that said, let's go ahead and get into it. If you like this video, at the end of the video, if you like it, if it provided value to you, please hit the sub button. That helps a lot. But first thing I wanted to get into was lighting. So this is pretty much like one of the biggest things that's going to do it. So I've already got my lighting set up. I'm not going to remake this scene. I'm just going to show you what I did with it. Okay, so the first thing that you want to do is you want to go get a directional light, which probably comes with your level. And you want to make this movable. And then you want to set this to a higher value like 6. Okay, and now by default, the directional light will just be facing directly down. So shadows won't really be there. Now this level's probably not going to look a whole lot better just by doing this, but it might a little bit. So if we were to rotate this, you can see we got a little bit more detail in the lighting. This will help with shadows and stuff. But you can adjust that. That's mainly for shadows. Okay. Then the second thing that we do is we go to the skylight and we turn this down to 0.3. Now, the reason I turn it down is because if I leave this at 1.0, everything gets too bright. I don't like that. I like there to be more shadows and stuff. So I turn this down to 0.3. Make sure you have effects world and cast shadows on. The skylight, what it does is it illuminates the models to be more to be brighter. So if we were to put this at like 15, the models would be really bright. I don't like that. So I like to do 0.3. I feel like that's a good color for what I like to do. Okay, the next thing we need to do is go back to the directional light, and we need to add a color to it. Just a slight tint. It doesn't need to be anything crazy, but I like a little yellow. You can also do a little blue if you want something more cooler looking, but I like the yellow. I think it looks pretty good. So that is basically it for the directional light and the skylight. The next thing that you want to look over is fog. So you may or may not have this in your level. This is exponential height fog. So if you don't have it, just click this little quickly add to the project. Go to volumes, and I believe. Actually, just can I search for it? Let's see here. Oh, it's under visual effects. So go to exponential height fog and just drag it into your level. So that's that'll help add a lot of detail, because if we look, if I turn it off, you can see everything far away. Now you may want that, and you can adjust this with the fog height fall off and the fog density. But one thing in art that artists tend to use is they make things in the distance less bright in color, less saturated, and fog can do that really well. And this is, since there's a lot of trees and stuff, the fog is bouncing the light a lot. If we were to go out to like another area, it's not as bad. But it's just because there's a lot of trees in here that the fog is bouncing the light more. And it creates like a swampy area. But you can adjust that however you want. But as you can see with fog, it definitely adds a lot more depth to the scene. The next thing we need to do is in the post-process volume. So if you don't have a post-process volume, I recommend adding one. You can just go up here to add, go to volumes, and it's down here, post-process volume. Okay, so now the first thing you want to do if you go down here is you want to, where is it? You want to search for infinite extent. Click that to true and it'll fill the whole level. Okay, so we want to turn on global illumination. Now by default, I'm using Lumen, but by default, if we don't have anything, this is what the scene looks like. It still looks pretty good, but the shadows and stuff aren't there. If you can't use Lumen, I recommend Screen Space. It adds a little bit of shadows to the trees and stuff and looks better. But if you can use Lumen, and I recommend having this as a setting in your settings menu, it looks a lot better. The shadows are way more realistic. The light bounces through the trees more. Okay. And then same for the reflections. If you go down to, let's see here. If you go down to, where is it? Let's unsearch this and I'll show you where it is. So if we go down to global illumination, turn that off. And if we turn off reflections, well, now the water is going to lose a lot of its detail. Actually, I think I still have it on, so let's go to none. So as you see, the water loses a ton of detail. The trees aren't reflecting and everything. So I like to turn on screen space. It adds reflections. It's cheap too. Screen space reflections are pretty cheap. You can use Lumen, and it'll reflect anything outside the scenes, like the clouds and the fog and stuff. But I like screen space, so I'm gonna keep that. I might add Lumen as a setting, but I like screen space reflections. So we've got the Lumen GI and the reflections, or the global illumination and the reflections. The next thing we want to do is, this is a little trick. If you go to the directional light, and you scroll down to light shafts, if you turn these off, which they will be off by default, I believe it's here. If you turn these on, not only do the light come through like trees and stuff, but it will add God rays. So if we, where is it? Where's the light? Not too sure where my sun is. I think it's over there. So if we go through here, there should be some God rays. Yeah, so there's the God rays. So if you just turn this off, they go away. But definitely have light shaft occlusion on. This is ambient occlusion. So definitely have that on. It increases shadow quality. It's off by default, so make sure to enable that. And then we went through, the final thing is volumetric clouds, and this is for lighting. You can go up to volumes, and I believe, or maybe visual effects. Yeah, volumetric clouds. So drag that into your level. I've already had that. But if we go up, and we look up at the sky, we have actual like physical clouds moving and stuff. If we turn that off, they go away. So it adds a lot of depth to it, which is good. Then we're going to move on to post-process now. This is something that can really change the scene a lot. And this is called color grading. If you're familiar with like film or video editing, you'll probably use this. But if you go over down to color grading here, and you go to global, I like to, let's actually turn this off so you can see what it looks like without the color grading. As you can see, it's pretty bland without the color grading. But with the color grading, it turns very bright and vibrant. So the settings I like to use for saturation are 1.3 to 1.5. If we turn this to 1.0, it goes back to gray. So I like to use 1.5. Contrast is, I keep it around 1.1 to 1.3. This is 1.0. It just adds a little more vibrancy to the scene. I like 1.2. Gamma, you can leave that as default. That increases the brightness of the screen. So if we turn it to 0, I recommend just leaving that at 1. Gain, by default, is at 1.0. I like to turn it down to 0.6 for a little more cinematic feel. And that is pretty much it for the color grading. The other thing that you can do, but you're going to have to make this yourself if you want, is if you want to achieve an effect like stylization, you can go in here and you can add a post-process material through the array, use asset, and then we can do comic or cell, I believe it's this one. So now we've got cell shading, and then we have the outline. I hired someone to make these, but now we've got a little bit of like a comic style. The screen space reflections are messing with that, so if we turn this off, it'll probably look better. Actually, no, it's just the color of the water, it's brown. But yeah, that is comic style graphics. That's a way to add that, is through shading, through post-process materials. That can help you out if you want that. If not, you don't have to worry about that. If you're just going for realism or something like that, you don't have to. That's how you do like stylization. So now we go on to assets. usually devs are afraid to use assets because of the asset flip insult that some gamers will use. I'm gonna be real with you. If you market your game on social media or Steam or whatever, Steam may not happen as much on Steam, but it still happens. If you don't use assets, they will still probably call you an asset flip if things are not consistent, or if things aren't of high quality. The asset flip insult usually doesn't mean it's like they notice you're using assets. They won't be able to point to an asset. It just means that things are inconsistent. So you may have a low poly with a high poly, or colors may not line up, or things like that. Um, so that is, don't be afraid to use assets. It's better to have quality stuff that someone else made or maybe is public that may be in a couple other games than to have some things be high quality or some things be low quality or just everything be low quality. Because most people who are doing solo dev are not artists, right? You don't have a lot, most of us don't have a lot of art experiences. Going in Blender and trying to make everything ourselves is going to produce lower quality results than just using someone else's art that you pay for. Um, so definitely recommend using assets. The one thing I will say about assets is, if you can, it's good to retexture them. Like this is a road asset, I think, but this texture I made, and I'm about to go into how I made this texture in a second. Um, so the way I made this texture is I used what's called PBR materials, and I'll show you what they look like. They are, let's see here, PBR. So this is a PBR material. It has an albedo, a metallic, an ambient occlusion, a normal, and a roughness. This creates really high quality materials that you can see right here or right over here. So I recommend using those as much as possible. It will remove that asset look or the default Unreal look for the most part. And that's really going to be like one of the biggest changes you can do to overhaul your scene is just PBR textures. If you want to make your own, you can use this software called Materialize by Bounding Box. I have a video on it by Bounding Box software. It's free. Just go here, Materialize by Bounding Box software, get it and download it. So you can download this, and what it does is it lets you take any image like off Google and put it into a PBR texture. You can also use something like Quixel Mixer from Epic Games. They have a lot of stuff that you can use, and that's how I made these, is through Quixel Mixer. But as long as you use your own textures for a lot of things, people won't really notice, and as long as they're consistent, they won't notice. So don't worry about the asset field, but it's definitely better to have high quality assets than it is to have low quality assets that you made yourself, that you just weren't able to make up to high quality due to lack of experience. There's nothing wrong with having that lack of experience. It takes years to become a good artist in 3D. But that's the main thing, is don't be afraid to use assets. Just retexture them with your own textures. And no one will notice. I promise you, no one's going to notice. The other thing is to keep colors consistent, right? Like if I were to take this green thing here, and because these are different textures, this blends into different textures. But as you can see, you can't really tell because they're kind of the same shade. This is like a lighter, browner green, and this is a pure green. So you can't really tell that they're different textures because they blend well together. Same with this. The road, it contrasts with the green, but it's not like a in-your-face contrast, right? It's not like green to blue. It's a shade of brown, and green and brown are complementary colors. You can actually look up color theory, and that'll help a lot. Basically, the idea is to keep like 4 to 6 colors, 4 to 5, 4 to 6 colors that you use throughout a scene, and only use shades of those. Don't add any color beyond that. So that's one of the main things that'll also help your art look better. And then we got the next tip that I have is never have a completely flat area, right? So if we go look at this other one, this whole thing is just flat. Like, yeah, there's trees and there's hills, but this whole texture is flat. There's nothing here. So with this, obviously, you know, there's grass. There's little blades of grass. They may not be big, but there's blades of grass. There's little plants here. And then there's like on the mud. I don't know why the landscape's messing up here. It'll probably just go out or in or whatever. I don't know. I'll probably re-render. But there's supposed to be a landscape here. But this mud doesn't have nothing on it. It has plants on it. Okay. And as you see, it doesn't necessarily look like it's all flat. Same with this. There's little pebbles on here. This is done through a texture. I'm going to show you how to do that real quick. But this is all pebbles, so it doesn't look necessarily completely flat. The shadows lay over different things like different grass and then the ground, so the shadows look 3D. But the parallax occlusion that I'm using here to get the pebbles on here, this is called, it's just called parallax occlusion mapping. You can go look, I made a video on this. You can go through my page and look for it. But basically what it does is it fakes tessellation, basically. So it allows you to look like you're tessellating a mesh without actually tessellating it. It uses the camera and light to trick that, to trick the player into thinking it's tessellated. So that is the never have anything completely flat and blending the colors together. That's super important. Okay. The other thing is make sure you have height variation. It's a subtle thing, but if every one of these trees was the same height and the same width, it would look really weird. So definitely have height variation. I even do it on the plants too. Okay. Then you can see if we were to, different trees are different heights, and that's very important for scale and making it feel real. Same with like these rocks up here, they're all different heights. They're pretty similar, but they're different heights. This tree, it's bigger than the rest. So that really adds a sense of scale, because if we look at this one right here, right, like all these trees are the same height. There's no variation in it, and it just looks flat and staticky. So definitely add height variation to things. Let me give you another example. This area is not finished yet, but each building is a different height, and that adds with scale. Same with like these rocks. These are different heights. Now these areas are not finished yet, so they're still being worked on. But that's a big thing that you can do. And that games like Apex Legends or AAA games do that all the time. If you look at a screenshot of like Apex Legends or really any AAA game, all of the models in a screenshot are going to be at a different height from each other. The other thing is on far away models like vistas, right? Don't use super high res textures. These models don't need to be super high res. If I were to tile these all the time, they would not look super good. Same with like those mountains. Like that's a picture. That's called a matte painting, and that's another way you can do vistas. But these are these look better in the distance when they're lower quality on texture, because it's not you're not tiling all the details down to a small amount. You're letting them be big and stretched. And I'll show you an example of what that looks like. Where is it? I'll show you an example of what that looks like in another map. So this is my other map. It's using pretty much the same principles as this map. So as you can see, in the distance we have these rocks. Now these look pretty high quality from here, and compared to like here, they look definitely higher quality. I probably shouldn't have tiled that so much. But if we go up close, and you probably don't want the player, you probably want to block it off before they get here. As you can see, it's low quality. It's super big, it's stretched out, but far away, the detail looks good. If I were to tile this, all that detail would be lost. So keep that in mind. The other thing is, whenever possible, use splines to create the mesh, like here, because a curved mesh looks a lot more appealing to the eye than a straight mesh. And you can use things like the landscape spline tool, or just make your own spline or spline meshes, or even use a marketplace plugin. I use those because it's easier to just quickly create splines with their plugins. It's just usually a one node. And I'm going to show you why splines will look better than trying to manually line everything up. So if we look here, okay, if we look here, I'm going to hide all these cubes, because this is the block out stuff. Okay, so if we look here, these are made with splines. And as you can see, it looks more detailed than if I were to just, now this is pretty much straight line, but if I were to do like cubes or model this or whatever, it probably wouldn't look as dynamic. having these little curves. Now this model's not really, what do you call it? Not displaced. Like it doesn't have a lot of cuts in it, so it is pretty sharp. That's kind of the style I want to go for. But doing splines helps a lot, and it can also speed up the level design process a lot. So definitely use splines. The other thing is keep shapes similar in style. These models are placeholders. I've got an art guy working on some better ones, but keep shapes similar style, right? Don't use a bunch of sharp trees and then some soft ones and then some sharp rocks and stuff next to each other. Make sure that the shapes are similar in texture and modeling style. That'll help a lot. Remember, that's pretty much it for all the tips. For the optimizations, all you want to do is, if you're targeting older hardware, I recommend using LODs, not nanite, because nanite, in my experience, maybe I have a setting wrong or something, nanite is pretty heavy on performance. You can push a lot more polygons than you could with LODs, but just using it is a lot more performance heavy, even on the same models. So if you're using optimized models already, just use LODs. If you're using super high poly models from like the marketplace that require nanite, then use nanite. But that is it. If you want to make LODs, I'm going to show you how to do that real quick. Let me just get out of here. Let me just take this model right here. It's a placeholder so we can work with it. So if we go to the modular building, okay, that's what I named it. You can either enable nanite support if it's a high poly mesh, but otherwise, what you want to do is we don't have any LODs. So what you do is you go down to LOD settings. You go to number LODs and you type in like 8 or 4 or whatever. Apply changes, and now we have LODs, and the triangles will change. You won't notice it far away, but I'm going to go up to so you can actually see it. I'm going to go up to like LOD 7. So far away, it'll just reduce the polygons and stuff because you won't see that. So, or you won't notice it, I guess, from far away. So that's a big thing. The other thing is you can go into HLODs. It's a way of grouping having the engine group a bunch of models together and then create one small mesh or one big giant mesh from them that has one material. So it reduces draw calls and polygon counts in the scene. And that's for far away things. So like if I were to go over here and I were to look at this, an HLOD would be used to convert these into one model and one material to reduce draw calls. And you can do that with pretty much anything. You can look into videos on how to use HLODs, but they're not too complex. The other thing is whenever you're doing trees or really anything that you're going to spawn a lot of, use something like the foliage tool, because you can have thousands of these or hundreds of these without much performance loss. I think all of these have about a 3 to 4 FPS drop by having all of these. But you go up to the foliage tool and you use this. Foliage tool does not have to be trees or plants. It can be literally anything you want, and it will instance them on the GPU so they don't use a lot of performance. So if you were to use a ton of stuff, use the foliage tool. Remember, it doesn't have to be grass or trees or anything. The other thing that's really important is to keep the landscape itself pretty low resolution. Don't use a super high resolution like 64 by 64 or 128 by 128. 4 by 4 or 8 by 8 is enough. You can still sculpt it pretty well. You still use splines. You can use all sorts of stuff. Another thing about the landscape that I want to mention is don't sculpt in mountains. Use static meshes for this. This is a mesh that I had my modeler create. It's from Quixel, but I had to make modifications to it, like UV mappings and stuff, and to make it, because it used to just be one-sided, but now it's two-sided. So now what I can do is I can actually go in here, and I can add my own textures to this, like this, to fit with the environment I have. But don't model in or don't sculpt in mountains. Use a static mesh for that. So that's pretty much it. Like I said earlier, if this video helped you out, please hit the sub. I'm going to go ahead and make a couple of these changes just so you can see, at least some that I can use. I don't have assets for grass, so I'm not going to do that. But if we go to I'm going to make a couple changes here. If you already got the details you need for the tips, you can go ahead and end this video. But I'm going to show you what it looks like if you take this old one. So if we go to the first thing, which is post-process, and we go to saturation, we put this at 1.5. Already we see more color. Contrast, we see more shadows. Gain, we see more darkness. Now this is a night scene, so I don't recommend using gain. But if we go to directional light, okay, we modify this like that. We go to skylight, and we go to 0.3. That looks good. I've already got that set up. And then we go and we enable the God rays. Actually, I don't know if this is gonna work because it's a nighttime scene, but we can see. Yeah, so there's already a little bit more ambient occlusion. If we go into the foliage itself, shoot, I forgot. They don't have, in Unreal 4, they don't have the tree, so I gotta figure out. Sorry, I have not used Unreal 4 in a while. Yeah, it's this one. So for some reason, let's show in Content Browser. So if we go to this model, okay, and he's using, this was from an asset. I don't remember exactly how he was using it. But if we go to SM Maple, oh, it's right here. Okay, SM Maple. Actually, I don't know if that was an asset or not. I think I made that. But if we go here and we change, he should have an option for color. So if we change the color and the subsurface to a more green, like a darker green, now they should, in theory, look more natural. Let's do it a little bit more. Let's make this more green. Let's make this more green. Actually, I think I just made the branches green. As you can see, this looks a little bit better. I think I made it too green, but regardless, that makes it a little bit better. We'd want to add in grass here now. I don't have any grass assets, so I can't. Actually, I do have a grass asset, I think. Let me, I think it's this one. So if we add in, wait, hold on, let me just, I recommend using grass maps, but let's turn this up to 25. So if we go in here and we add grass, these are some really low poly grass models I made. They're not perfect, but if we go in here, already it's looking better. Already it's looking better. I think it puts them on the trees, but regardless, it's looking better already. So definitely add grass in. Then the final thing was we don't have PBR textures, so we can't add that. Is there anything else? Colors consistent, height variation. I can't change the height variation. But yeah, that's pretty much it. It does look a little bit better, but I don't have the assets to actually make this look better. But as you can see, the colors already looking way better here. We've got details on the ground. I recommend rocks. You know, this road should probably have like a better texture on it. Here we go. So I remade this map. It's pretty much the same thing, just trails and trees. I put a little pond in there. So this is the map I was gonna remake. I was gonna use this texture, but I don't know what it was. But yeah, as you can see, there's this new map. This is using the same, pretty much the same assets. I think these were the same assets as the other one, but I made a bigger. You know, I added better, more consistent lighting models. I added a little lake, rocks in the lake, better road, park benches, things like that, trash cans. So just a lot of little details, you know, grass. So if you do that, things will look a lot better. I'm gonna go ahead and end this video. Thank you for watching. Have a good one.